women, thank you for joining A Woman's Strength, empowering stories from struggles to triumph. We are back with Krista Galvez, and we're going to be talking about identity. But let me tell you a little bit about Krista if you didn't see our last episode, which I recommend you go back and watch because it's powerful. Now, Krista Galvez, she is a reparenting coach. She helps moms with little ones to stop the power struggles, yell less, and connect more so that they can show up as a mom they wish they had. Let's get Krista up here.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
So let's kind of do a quick recap of, I think the example we used was losing weight from the last time.
Yes. So we were talking about like how why resolutions don't stick. And so we gave some examples of like how to make your goal a SMART goal, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. To also have an accountability buddy or create ways that you can be accountable to yourself and celebrate all the little wins along the way to the big goal. And then having a support system, whether that's like a trusted group of friends that are, on the same path as you. Obviously, if you're losing weight, you don't want to be hanging out with the friends that eat fast food all the time, right? And then possibly like having a mentor or somebody that can help you to look at things from a different perspective. And I think that's kind of where we're segueing into this, like, I guess, chapter about identity, is that like the goals and the reasons why they don't stick is not just about a lack of willpower or that you just need to be more motivated. But there's actually something much, much deeper than what is visible on the surface. And part of that is like, it's not just the behavior change that you want, right? When you want to lose weight. So maybe we can just start off there. Is like, what is deeper than that?
What is deeper than that? It's hard to reach our goals, our New Year's goals, is because it's really on the surface. And really losing weight could be societal. We talked about how identity is already in us. And we have to kind of like unpack the stuff that has been layered on top of our identity, which is the hurt, the pain, the resentment, the unforgiveness, all that. It's like when we were born in the womb, right? We were perfect beings. We come out as babies. We don't have any, we don't have any resentment. We don't even know what that is. But what happens is over the years and the decades, we have, somebody hurt me here. I have rejection, and it just piled up. So it's hard. The root of who we are, the core of who we are is down here. But we got all this stuff that we have to unpack. So this segment is going to be super important because, Krista, you had some great points that you shared with me about connecting with the core of who we are and why that's so important.
Right. If you want to like make losing weight, or I would say, maybe some people will say like they want to lose weight because they want to be healthier. So let's maybe just talk about the goal of being healthier. We talked before about like, well, what can get in the way of that? Right. And then also another question is like, well, who are you being and what benefit are you actually getting by not reaching your goal? Because I think that has to do with like the identity that you were just talking about that's like layered down below. And then something else that you mentioned, which maybe we can go back and kind of talk about each of these things, is like when you make this change, well, first of all, like why are you invested in being healthier? What goes with that maybe a certain body image. And in order for your goal to work, it needs to be very specific to you, your skills, your desires, your core beliefs. So maybe we can kind of start by unpacking some of that.
That's a good point. Because really we have to determine who we are. So we have to get on that journey of self-discovery and understanding, having introspective, right? And self-reflection. Who are we? I mean, for me, when I was going through this of trying to figure out my identity, it was like, I had to sit back because by then my kids are grown. I was getting out of a marriage and I identified as a wife, but I didn't identify as an individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Maybe I can like just kind of take that apart a little bit more too, right? It's like when we have all these roles, if you like for some of your clients like who are empty nesters, if you're no longer a mom, well, who are you beyond that? If you're no longer a wife, who are you beyond that? If you're no longer a grandma, who are you beyond that? Right. And like I think what you mentioned before is that like who you are at your true core is under all of those roles that we play. It takes some excavation. Like I almost imagine it like if you were this blank slate that at birth, then all of a sudden like society is boom throwing mud at you. You got to be like this. Boom, your parents are throwing their stuff on you. Your friends, your teachers, they're just throwing all this mud on you. So by the time you're like an adult, you're just like caked on. And then if you try to do stuff on that surface level, it doesn't actually go down beyond those layers of mud, right? So we got to like chisel away at all the things that are not you to allow that version of you to come forward.
Yeah. And it's a total restart because I had to explore all my passions. Like what was I passionate about when I was younger? And can I bring that into my today?
Mm-hmm.
What values pretty much stay the same, right? And interests though vary as you mature. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to do activities, just figure out, do I still like that? Let me try something new. And that takes courage. Understanding who you are at the core will then help you reach the goals, whether it's New Year's or not.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be settled and live in your authenticity to be able to go out and meet those goals and enjoy life. It's not just, oh, I got to meet these goals. You got to really enjoy life, but you can't do that when you don't know who's under that hard clay, like Krista was talking about, that, with the mud slung on us all are really for 2 decades, right? From the time we're
Yep.
born till like 20, and then we start to thaw out and this mud starts coming off, and it's like, well, who am I? By then we're knee deep into who society says we are and who society says we should be. So
Yep.
it's a lot of unpacking. Krista, how do you do it as a mom of young kids?
Something that I've read, I can't remember where. So this didn't come from me. I'm not going to take credit for this, but they're saying that like when you get triggered or bothered by your child, they're exhibiting some type of behavior that you find intolerable, infuriating. That is the very thing, the very part of you that you are also rejecting. So let me give you like an example. Like I was always told to like be quiet, right? Don't make a fuss. We don't want to hear what you have to say. So when I see my daughter speaking her mind, I'm like, who does this girl think she is? Look at her taking up space. Look at her being big. And then there's like this like part of me that's just like, she can't be doing that. We were not allowed to do that. So I feel like those like as a parent, those are the like the breadcrumbs to connecting to your identity. So when I get activated in those moments, well, first I'm not going to lie, it's hard sometimes to like not get wrapped up in all the emotions and all the things that are coming up. But when I'm in a calm state, connected into myself, grounded, that's when I can get curious. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting that that behavior made me feel a type of way. Doesn't have anything to do with my daughter. That's something that is in me that is ready to be addressed. Like it's just ready to be addressed and healed.
Shedding that old skin, right?
Yeah.
Letting go that old identity and trying to put on this new coat of embracing yourself. But when you don't know what you don't know, and you don't have a community around you, a coach, especially a therapist, it's really hard to go that alone.
So those are like the scars that have originated from a relational rupture, a relational trauma, a relational wound, whatever you want to call it, where it was me and another person that I cared about. Honestly, I've been working on myself my whole life, right? I'm 34 and like really got deep into it the last 5 years where it was like my full-time job. And what I learned from that time is like, you cannot heal relational trauma by yourself. It just doesn't make sense, right? Like you need to rebuild that trust and connection with another person. It doesn't have to be the same person that, you know, caused that rupture, but somebody that you can trust, that you can be yourself with. I really don't see like any other way.
Well, I agree. You cannot heal with the person who traumatized you. That just never works. Okay. You can go back after you've gotten the strength. Because when you find out who you are, you have this power of this confidence in knowing who you are. And you can, with a lot of grace and love, be able to step to somebody who traumatized you to be able to share how it felt and how it affected you and how you're over it. But I think it's important. Tell me how you do it, Krista. But for me, I had to visualize. I had to sit back and say, okay, I might feel super lost right now, but let me just close my eyes and visualize who I want to be. If I could just, clear the slate, like you mentioned earlier, who does Rosita want to be in this moment moving forward? Because I can't go back. That visualization for me was extremely powerful. And that gives me strength when I'm trying to let go of the old me and move into Rosita 2.0.
I feel like for, I don't know, I'm making an assumption, but like maybe for empty nesters, that would be like great. Sitting quiet for me as a mom. I'm like, okay, I got my kids crying and it's just like a little bit chaotic. For me, I'm like, I gotta bite off a smaller piece. And then I would invite you all who are listening, to look at your goal and ask yourself, why is this important? Like, let's just say the goal is to lose weight. So you ask yourself, why is this important? And maybe I'll say to you, because I want to be healthier. You're like, okay, great. Now, why is that important? Like, I want to feel good in my body. Well, why is that important? Well, because as a mom, I want to be able to move comfortably and pick my children up and carry them and play with them in the playground. Well, why is that important? Maybe because my parents didn't play with me. And here I am trying to create something new and different for my children. Now, why is that important to me? I think you could go like 7 layers deep, right? And really, like, I guess for me, why that's important is because like I want to have that connection. I want my children to know that they're safe, that they're loved, and that I'm here for them. So like if you just follow that piece, it's just like, wait, hold on. First we started off with like, you want to lose weight. But really, as you peel off the layers, it's like, well, I just want to connect with my children.
In that process, when you read back what you wrote, you can like cross off what no longer serves you. And then that list will get smaller and smaller. That's a great way to do that if you have time. But as a mom of young kids, I get it. You don't have that time to visualize, maybe even voice memo. Is that something y'all can do? Is just kind of, okay, this is what I'm thinking today of why it's important for X or who I want to be. A quick voice memo might be sufficient for understanding your identity, or at least peeling back the layers.
Yeah, I think that's totally doable. And even amidst these things, right? Like, I feel like it doesn't have to be super complicated, like to your point, or take a lot of time. And then, like, what I'm hearing you say is like, do what works for you. Like, maybe if you're drawing with your kids, you could just take a crayon and like write some notes down for yourself. What you were saying of like visualizing who you want to be, that is super important. I guess what the point I was trying to make is that like maybe I don't always start there. For me, it's like I need to excavate first of like why is this important? Why is this important? And then when I get to the meat, which is like I want to connect with my kids, then that's when I would go, okay, what does that look like?
Yeah, and it really depends what stage of life you're in too, and how you process. The why for me would be like, oh, some days that's just too much to answer. It's easier for me to visualize.
Yeah.
and move forward and then get to the why. So it just depends. That's why it's so awesome that we have different women, different types, come from different backgrounds, because it's all about growing,
Hmm.
and everybody has a different way of doing that. But I love that, because in how you do it, you'll also be able to see, okay, wait, this limits my behavior, or this is a toxic relationship, or why am I still believing this doesn't even apply to me anymore. But you've been doing it over and over again because that has been your identity for a couple of decades. Do you find
Yeah.
that to be true, Krista?
Yeah, I feel like I was giving you guys like the enlightened version of what my list sounds like, but maybe like Krista 10 years ago would have been like, I want to lose weight. Why? Because I want people to notice me and to give me attention. Why? Like I want to be desirable. Right? Like I want people to like stop and notice me so that I can feel good about myself. Right? And if I'm looking at that, it's like, what was I doing then? I was going out to the clubs, I was getting my hair done, my nails done to just try to look good. And I was hanging out with people who were partying and doing drugs and stuff like that. It's like, okay, that, like what you said, is like, is this actually serving you? And I just want to highlight that question because when it comes to your getting to your core and your identity, that's a huge question. It's like, is this serving me, or is it allowing you to shine brighter, or is it dimming your light, and is it making you contract and feel smaller?
This is a long process. It's not going to be like a week and you're going to have clarity. You're literally unpacking layers to get to the core of who you were meant to be. So it's important to take intentional steps and to align yourself with your actions, with your vision as you move along. And again, it's going to come to you as there's a thing where we hold on to a lot of stuff in our spirit, in our heart, that is not necessarily healthy, wherever it came from, whether it's from childhood or a traumatic, heartbreaking relationship. We hang on to it, but then it also infects our choices moving forward. So that's why this process, identifying who you are, is so important, because you'll be able to recognize it and let it go. Oh, that's toxic. Because how do you know? Because you've been reading up on it. You've been recognizing the various behaviors. So you can let that go. And once you let go stuff that you don't need anymore, that doesn't serve you anymore, then you have more real estate and more open to other things that could serve you in the time frame you're at right now.
I think like what you just mentioned is super valuable. It's like I heard you talking about like energetic boundaries, developing the skill of discernment, right? Like, is this for me or is it not? And like, I know that as a mom, that is a super valuable skill. And because that could be the difference between like saying yes to all these like obligations, play dates or whatnot, visiting family, visiting friends, or maybe you just like want to stay at home with your kids and have a quiet day, right? And it's like these are the activities that you may be saying yes or no to that affect your energy level. Like, are you tired at the end of the day? Are you feeling energized and active at the end of the day? When you get to the core of who you are, what you want, how you want your life to look, then you can choose the actions that support that core identity.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's changing your behavior. So this is going to be a gradual process. It's going to take patience and commitment from you, and also to be able to give yourself grace throughout the process, because identifying specific behaviors that you want to improve is going to take some dedication to understanding who you are, and then break them down, like Krista was mentioning, into manageable steps.
So I wonder if we could actually speak to more of that, right? Like we want to talk more about like the how and to make it in such a way that it's not so overwhelming, right? Because I think that might stop some people, right? Of like, okay, if I have to like like flick a switch and just be this whole new person all at once. Like, that's a lot, right?
Yeah, it is. And with today's world being so incredibly busy, where do you start? How do you start? And can you keep it going? Yeah. So you got to start small.
What would that look like for you? Like starting small.
Well, when I was going through my separation, that's the closest thing that I can remember. I I really had to allow myself to feel my feelings and be okay with it. And then start off by connecting with a community of women. I went to a Bible study that really, I was in a safe space. So that was my starting small, stepping out and going to a Bible study that would help me, still uncomfortable because I don't want to share my stuff in front of everybody, but necessary. That would be
Yeah.
small for me. And it was consistent because I had to go every week.
Actually, it's funny, like my journey was also similar, where I invested in myself by joining a program which had like a 4-month commitment where we met once a week. And actually, I didn't even know that my first step was to like feel my feelings, or like maybe broader sense is just like be open to everything that you're experiencing and everything that you are without judgment. Right? Like, so that's what I was guided to do, is to just like you said, be with my feelings, and also to be able to just sit by myself in silence, because that is when all these thoughts started coming, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that this has been like what's been circling through my mind all this time. And like, no wonder I'm acting the way I'm acting. No wonder I'm reaching for that sugary snack. No wonder I was like numbing out with alcohol. Like some of the things that were in my mind were so mean.
Were you a mean girl? You were a mean girl to yourself, right?
Oh yeah, like the meanest. Like if you've seen the Mean Girls movie, that had nothing on
I
like the talk that was going on in my head.
ditto.
I call her Chloe. That helped, right? To actually like name this part of you, so it's actually not you at your core. So I had to just let Chloe talk. And yeah, she would just say some mean things of like, why bother? Why are you even doing that? Like, oh, that's too hard. You can't do that. Or like, look at you. You failed again. And I was just like, man, I am so great at being nice to other people. How about I give myself a little dose of that?
Yeah, that's the other thing I learned in being in this group is that when you're in a group of women who are going through the same thing you're going through, there's such a camaraderie and there's such a grace. And it was a Bible study. So the women would come around and I was able to share, be vulnerable in a safe place. And they would come around and pray over me. And it helped to just ease my, feeling like I had to be perfect.
Mm,
Right. And we
yes.
had to do things right. And we can't show people like all that was busted open. And now I could then thaw out, if you will, and feel my feelings, not to stay in them, but to be able to recognizing, acknowledging the pain, and then moving forward in healing.
I think that's a huge, huge thing, is that like when we get the message that there's like bad feelings or negative feelings and we're not allowed to feel them, then we actually spend all this effort to shove it down, to put it aside. It's not like, oh, poof, it's gone. It's actually still there, but you're using like this part of your brain to shove it aside and actually giving it more power, right? But when you actually just let the feelings just be there, then they like run its course.
Well, and then if you keep stuffing it, it's going to manifest some kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in
Yeah.
your tone or you go from 0 to 100 in your anger, or medically. I
Yes.
mean, it's going to come out.
Yeah.
So we don't allow your feelings to be in charge. You be in charge. and feel those feelings for a period of time, not to live in them, not to go get revenge or anything like that. Just to cry and release that pain and then be able to move forward.
Yes, that's like what I guide people to in the reparenting process, right? Of just like holding that space. And like that's, as a mom, what I'm modeling for my daughter, but I'm noticing that I can't hold space for her when she's having a tantrum if I don't allow myself to have the feelings. So like you were saying is that like when it's bottled up, when it's shoved down, for me that looks like getting like burnt out because like I'm trying to do all the things and trying to be perfect and not ask for help. And then like any little thing, it becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back. Then here I am cussing out my husband. Yikes. There I am having a tantrum while my kid is having a tantrum. Yikes. Like that I'm not the parent anymore in that situation. I'm not the captain of the ship. I'm jumping overboard.
And the thing is we've always had control. We've always had the free will. I mean, even in my faith, I integrate my faith a lot with my coaching because in my faith, this is what I learned. God does not give me a spirit of fear or timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. So I already have it within me to be in charge of my feelings. And even my faith with God, He's not telling me you have to love me. It's free will. I choose to have my faith. I'm saying that because it's like we already have the power. We already have inside of us what we need to manage our feelings and have emotional intelligence. But we have not been taught that. So we just fall back into the Debbie Downer and, oh, I'm never going to be any better. This is the way my life is going to be. But yeah, you can be better and you can make a change.
And I feel like what you just said is like the reason why I'm so glad that I was in this program, because I'm the kind of person that's like, I had to put my money there. If I just, I don't know, had a friend do it, or I just try to do it myself, like by like writing in my journal and just kind of like having these conversations myself, there's nothing that's like making me commit. So I think when it comes back to like goal setting and to having the motivation to change your identity, sometimes you got to put things in place to help keep you accountable and to have it be like a long-term thing, right? Because you're going to have these ups and downs. And then I think going back to the why is this important to you? What is really motivating you? That knowledge is going to help you when you do have a setback, because the setbacks are normal, right? They are always going to happen. And that just means that you're on the verge of a breakthrough. So when you can reconnect with your why, that's going to keep driving you, even when you're just like, I really don't feel like it. Because you're going to not feel like it sometimes.
Most of the time. For me, I had to be initially, as I'm learning to discover myself and face myself, right? Because we have faults. Everybody has faults. We've got the good, the bad, the ugly, but now we see the fabulous in us. So it's important to be in community. And then when you're strong enough, you will have learned the tools and the techniques of how to do it on your own. But it's so important to start with community.
And yeah, like even after I graduated like from this program, right? Like I might not be paying for support anymore, but then I've created this ecosystem around me where it's like I could just call up a friend and be like, hey, let me be real with you. I'm backsliding right now. I need help. It doesn't have to be the paid help anymore, right? But like for a while, actually for me, I was in this container for 3 years. And like that's what I needed at the time. But now I'm just thinking back to like the how, right? And if we can like make it a little bit of like a list for people, I'm almost thinking like number one is like really getting clear on what it is that you want. Whether it starts off as like a visualization or taking pen to paper or even writing a voice memo. Because I feel like if you understand the type of learner you are, whether that's like visual, auditory, kinesthetic, like that will help you to get in touch with the goal. Like there's still a goal, right? Of like whether the goal is like I'm going to lose weight or like I want to shift into this new identity. And you also have to understand where you're starting from. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And if I could just interject, I think that if you don't have time to write, it is so important to at least voice note it to yourself. Because I was so frustrated one time, and I said I was just pouring out my heart in this voice note. And I listened to it later and I'm like, wow, I was really hurting. Like I heard the pain in my voice. And it helped me to decide, no, I don't want to stay in this. I mean, when the pain gets greater than what you think is pleasure, that's when you have to really make a huge shift. So I like that. So number one is determining where you are. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's like, I think it's like both. It's like where you're going, where you're starting. And I think to add to what you just said is like to record it. I think that helps when you are taking those baby steps, because sometimes it's going to be like a teeny tiny step forward and it might not seem like you're going anywhere. But then when you can look back, right, or like listen back to where you started, especially when you're having like one of those down moments, you'll see like, oh shoot, actually all these little teeny tiny steps have accumulated to create this big impact.
You'll see where your little W wins are and your big wins, but you have to be consistent.
I think that's
Yeah.
key. Consistency, right? I have a rule for myself. Like I'm doing like tiny habits of like 3 minutes of meditating every day because I want to connect with myself more. And it's like 3 minutes. That's easy. I could do that. Even if it's just like a tiny little bit, as long as you stay the course, that is what is important. And my rule is like, if I'm going to miss one day, I'm not going to miss two. Right? Like it's okay to like have those days where you're just like, you know what, I really don't feel like it. Just don't let it go for 2 days. Right? Or like do what I'm doing is like make your little habit like so tiny that it's like, how can you not do 3 minutes? Right? So sometimes I'll do that like when I sit in my car before I start the engine, I'll just put my timer on. Or the opposite, when I'm about to get out of the car, that's when I do it. But the point I want to emphasize is that like stay with it, stay consistent. Change is not linear. It's not going to be like I'm going to keep going forward, 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 forward. You might slide back like 20 steps, but if you just keep recommitting, that's what matters. Is think of the end goal. Think of the long game.
So number one is determining where you are and where you want to go. Then number two is consistency. Small bits of commitment at a time. And then what would you say is number three?
I would say is to just be curious all the time, to have some self-awareness, because anything you do or don't do is information. Let's just say I was out of alignment one day. First of all, can you like not beat yourself up about it? Maybe at the beginning you will be beating yourself up about it. That's okay. That's part of the journey, right? Like maybe notice that like, oh, I'm being judgy to myself. Right? I like to journal, so I will write that down. I'm like, oh, dang, I messed up. I'm judging myself hard. And then also ask yourself, like, what's coming up for me, right? That's where the curiosity comes in without judgment. Just like imagine you're talking to a friend, but you're talking to yourself, like, what's coming up for me? Because maybe you're coming up against a roadblock, and that, like, you know, like what I mentioned before about being triggered by your kid, this applies too. Like if you're hitting a roadblock, what is there? Don't just drive over it and just be like, okay, peace out. These are the things that are going to help you to build resilience, to integrate all the parts of you, reach your goal in a sense of like wholeness without leaving any of your parts behind.
Yeah. And to tie into that, something that you said is to be able to give yourself grace,
Mm-hmm.
right? The triggers are going to come. But when you can recognize that they're starting to come, right? We feel in our bodies we're about to blow. Like the stress keeps coming up and coming up. And when you can recognize that, then set some rules in place in terms of, okay, let me walk away right now. Excuse myself and go to the bathroom for a second. Take a couple of deep breaths and recognize that this is a trigger. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to let the trigger win. You can win because you are in control. So just take a moment and maybe even jot down or voice memo what it is that triggered you in that moment and process it like later. Because a lot of times we're in a position where we can't just stop, but we can get a hold of ourselves before we become that volcano.
Yeah, I'm like I'm thinking about like my goal of like being more connected with my daughter. So obviously yelling at her kind of goes against that and makes things a lot harder. So for me, right, what if like that's my goal? It's been my goal for a while. The first couple times I'm yelling at her, right? And sometimes I don't even realize I'm being triggered. But then there is that time where it's like, "Oh, I'm yelling. Oh, this is not in alignment." Right? So I guess what I'm trying to say with this is like sometimes you're going to make those mistakes and then it just like kind of improves a little bit every time. Like I didn't even know I was feeling something in my body. It felt like I just went from 0 to I was yelling at her and just letting her have it, right? But then it's like the next time I'm like, "Oh, I remember how this feels. It doesn't feel good when I yell." And then I started to recognize, well, what's happening before I do the unwanted behavior? Right? But I didn't learn that like the first week. Maybe it took me like, I don't know, I'm just being conservative, 6 months to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
And then once you develop that awareness, now you can't unsee what you saw.
Yeah. When you know better, you'll do better, just like Maya Angelou says. And it's part of
Yes.
your goal. You want to, in your case, not yell. So you put accountability kind of within your own mindset of, oh, wait, I could feel myself rising up in my anger. So let me fall back because I don't want to yell. Because
Yeah.
why? Because I don't want to be that kind of parent. Because why?
Right.
Because I want to be loving and I want to
Right.
show her it's okay to have emotions, but you don't have to let them win. I mean, the whys do come in, but
Yes.
self regulation is key. Be kind to yourself because you're going to make some pitfalls.
And then I think like that also I don't know what step we're on, but just like you can make tiny goals, right? That accumulate to this bigger picture. So like for me, for example, right now my tiny goal is to do 3 minutes of meditation. Why? Because then that allows me to hear what thoughts are running in the background, what kind of judgments I have on myself, and to like choose to be in this state of calm so that that's the energy that I'm starting my day with.
So important to start off your day with the right energy. So important. Krista, we are at the end of our podcast. And I mean, we could go on forever, but both of us have complimentary discovery calls that you can reach out and contact us to further talk about this, to create a mini plan for you. So, Krista, can you share with everybody how they can get in contact with you?
Yes, I think the best way is to just send me an email so that I can share like my calendar link. My email is Krista, Krista, at KristaCoaching.com.
Thank you so much for being with us today. And everybody, I invite you to go to my website, movingforwardforlife.com. Go ahead and book your clarity call. It's 30 minutes for you, all about you. And let's create a mini plan for 2024. Please remember that you are not alone and you have the power to choose the trajectory of your life. So you have a choice. Let 2024 be all about you being able to manage those choices. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye, everybody.